Okay, so today for language arts, Unit 1, Lesson 23. We have one more lesson after today for Unit 1 before we finally move on to something else. So today is drawing conclusions in fiction. So something we're familiar with. We've drawn conclusions in nonfiction. We've done this in social studies. It's going to be very similar. It's really good practice to continue that skill set. So today, when we complete this lesson, we'll be able to use inferences to draw conclusions. That should sound familiar for us. Use cause and effect to draw conclusions, compare and contrast to draw conclusions, and categorize to draw conclusions. So different skill sets that we're combining, right, to then draw conclusions. Something that we've all these skill sets that we've worked with, we can, now add other tools to them to go beyond just those, sort of simpler tools to, draw conclusions now. And what's important, right, is some of this we do instinctively. But we want to make sure that we're drawing conclusions and not jumping to conclusions. So instinctively, sometimes we may jump to conclusions, but we want to make sure we have all our facts in place before we actually draw conclusions. Let's take a look here at our little soundbite.
Drawing conclusions is similar to making inferences. As you know, an inference is an educated guess based on facts or evidence and on your own prior knowledge. By combining several inferences to make a judgment, you can draw conclusions. Determining a cause and its effect, categorizing, and comparing and contrasting also can help you draw conclusions.
Yep. So, like I mentioned, we do this a lot when we're not even really aware of it. Some of those kind of skills we use every day, we don't really stop and think a lot about how, determining cause and effect and categorizing and comparing and contrasting will lead us to draw a conclusion. We just automatically do it. But in this environment, what we're reading, we can kind of slow down that process and take a little closer look at how we do that. And for our first point, oh, wait a minute, am I in the right? Oh, man.
No.
I'm not in the right one. No wonder it's looked weird. Okay. I was like, okay. I'm so sorry. Why did you guys say something? So, yeah, we need to be on lesson, I said it too, lesson 23. So I was scrolled up way too high onto the other set here. So drawing conclusions in fiction. That's where we need to be. As soon as I saw those gas prices, I was like, I have seen this before. This is not the right place. So here we go. Yeah, so drawing conclusions based on two or more inferences, discover connections between story events and ideas. That sounds a little more familiar. So let's listen again here and see if we get some different information.
As you learned in Lesson 10, drawing conclusions is like solving a mystery. As a reader, you gather facts from your reading, combine this information with what you know about the topic, and draw a conclusion about the significance of those facts. Conclusions are based on two or more inferences. By drawing conclusions in fiction, you can discover connections between story events and ideas as you read.
Okay, so yeah, again, though, same idea. We're using our facts. We're using inferences to draw conclusions. And going along with that sort of idea of active reading that we've been talking about asking questions, you can start drawing conclusions to get to those story events and ideas as you read. And, ask yourself, what's going to happen next? Ideas like that helps you draw conclusions. So it's all about continuing to ask questions as you read and being an active reader. That's the key word, being an active reader. Reading should not be a passive activity. You should constantly be thinking about what you're reading and absorb it. Okay, this looks a little more familiar. Laird's illness. That is fiction. We're not going to talk about rising gas prices. So what we have here is Laird's illness from In the Gloaming by Alice Elliott Dark, 1994. It says her son wanted to talk again suddenly. During the days, he still brooded, scowling at the swimming pool from the vantage point of his wheelchair, where he sat covered with blankets despite the summer heat. After he was asleep, Janet would run through the conversations in her mind and realize what it was she wished she had said. A month earlier, after a particularly long and grueling visit with a friend who'd come up on the train from New York, Laird had declared a new policy: no visitors, no telephone calls. She didn't blame him. People who hadn't seen him for a while were often shocked to tears by his appearance, and rather than have them cheer him up, he felt obliged to comfort them. She'd overheard bits of those conversations. One was no worse than the others, but he was fed up. He had said more than once that he wasn't cut out to be the brave one, the one who would inspire everybody to walk away from a visit with him feeling uplifted. Shaking their heads in wonder, he had liked being the most handsome and missed it very much. He was not a good victim. So what it says on our underlined portion in text box A, Laird is in a wheelchair and he is covered with blankets. Consider what these details indicate. So immediately with that section, he still brooded, scowling at the swimming pool from the vantage point of his wheelchair, where he sat covered with blankets despite the summer heat. You can make an inference about that. Well, if he's in a wheelchair and he's scowling at the pool, it sounds like he wants to be in the swimming pool, but obviously the wheelchair is preventing him, and he's covered with blankets. So Laird is either ill or injured, right? We can make that inference. And then second, the fact the people who hadn't seen him for a while are shocked by Laird's appearance indicates that his illness is having a dramatic effect on him. So we combine those two things, right? Wheelchair, covered in blankets, scowling at the pool. People who haven't seen him in a while were often shocked to tears by his appearance. That's somebody that sounds like they are, we've probably all seen this. We have, elderly folks in your family, maybe you've lost a loved one to an illness or something like that, and you watch their decline. And it's very hard to do. So that's what these people are seeing. And that you could draw a conclusion. Wheelchair, blankets, people shocked by his appearance. That's somebody who's likely suffering from an illness, a very severe one. That's the conclusion you can draw from that, right? And that's what we're talking about here, making those inferences that combine into drawing a conclusion. If we just took that first point, like I said, well, it could just be an injury, right? Or, it doesn't really give you enough. Maybe maybe he was born with a birth defect or some, congenital disease that he's been wheelchair bound his whole life. When you get to the second part, you understand that people who haven't seen him for a while are affected by his appearance. Now you see a decline in somebody's health. And you take those two together, boom, now you have a conclusion you could draw. Okay, let's leap over to our quiz. Lesson 23 quiz, not lesson 10 quiz. Let's open that up. Hit start here. And from our piece here again, it says test taking tips. You can conclude from details like blankets, despite the summer heat, and people were shocked by his appearance, that's what we're talking about, that Laird is seriously ill, even though the author never states this information. And you can make another inference if you didn't have the first piece of information. Shocked by his appearance, that too could be an accident. Maybe he was burned, or maybe he was an addict. Maybe he's suffering from addiction, which is going to take a toll on somebody. But the first piece of information helps fill that out, so you can then draw a more solid conclusion about what's going on with this individual. So question 1, Etta, could you read question 1 for us?
Did you call me?
Yeah, you want to read?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was in the kitchen. Okay. You said question 1.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Which statement is the most likely conclusion to draw on the basis of the information in the passage? A. Lord is being treated for a serious disease. B. Lord is indifferent about his medical treatment. C. Janet has little background in current medicine. Or D. Janet misses her friend's visits. And then A.
Yeah, we could definitely assume, right? We can make that conclusion from what we've read that he must be treated for a serious illness. He's suffering from something. Okay, and number 2, it's going to be some fill in the blanks here. And I just want to mention here, this passage here that we're going to read is, you might remember a few days ago, we read about a piece where somebody is out of their element and out in the cold. And he seems to be sort of not as concerned as he should be. That was kind of part of the ideas that we were looking at. This is from that same piece. It's To Build a Fire by Jack London. Tracy, could you read the first paragraph for us?
Yes. On this, the menu, the old-timer on Sulphur Creek had told him about it the previous from, and now he was appreciating the advice. Already on sensation had gone out of his feet. To build the fire, he had been forced to remove his mittens, and the fingers had quickly gone numb. His pace of 4 miles an hour had kept his heart pumping blood to the surface of his body and to on the extremities. But the instant he stopped, the action of the bomb is down. The cold of space smote struck the unprotected tip of the planet, and he being on that unprotected tip received the full force of the blow. The blood of his body recoiled before it. The blood was alive, like the dog, and like the dog, it wanted to hide away and cover itself up from the fearful cold. So long as he walked 4 miles an hour, he bumped that blood to the surface. But now it ebbed away and sank down into the recesses of his body. The extremities were the first to feel its absence. His wet feet froze the faster, and his exposed finger numbered the faster, though they had not yet begun to freeze. Nose and cheeks were already freezing, while the skin on of his body chilled as it lost its blood.
Okay. Sasha Gay, you want to read the next 2 paragraphs?
Okay. There was a fire, snapping and crackling and promising life with every dancing flame. He started to untie his moccasins. They were coated with ice. For a moment, he tugged with his numbed fingers, then realizing the folly of it, he drew his sheath knife. But before he could cut the strings, it happened. It was his own fault, or rather, his mistake. He should not have built the fire under the spruce tree. He should have built it in the open. No, Now the tree under which he had done this carried a weight of snow on its boughs. No wind had blown for weeks. No wind had blown for weeks, and each bought had fully frightened. Each time he had pulled a twig, he had communicated a slight agitation to the tree, an imperceptible agitation so far as he was concerned, but an agitation sufficient to bring about the disaster. From To Build a Fire by Jackson London, 1916.
Okay, so before we move on, I just want to think about what we've read in the situation that this guy's in, and that's going to help us draw conclusions. So, and by the way, the one word there is boughs, like the boughs of a tree is what they're talking about. And when he says each bough was fully freighted, meaning it was under the weight of the snow. So that's what we're winding up here, right? Is the mistake that he's made building a fire under this tree under the heavy weight of snow. So what conclusions can we draw about what's going to happen here, right? That's something to consider as we move on into the questions. And then fill in the blank here. First, it says in the first line, the narrator says, all this man knew. From the information in the passage, you can conclude that the man knows he must build a blank to blank up his wet, freezing feet. What two words do we need there?
Build a fire.
Fire to warm up his feet.
Yeah, this was pretty straightforward, right? I mean, there's, it's one of those contest taking skills. Look at, read the whole thing, and you can pretty much see there's only a few things that are going to make sense in here. Is he going to build a sandwich? And to what up his feet? Clean up his feet. There's obvious, only a few things that work really well here, particularly in the context of what we're reading. So this one's a gimme, I think. So yeah, to fire for our first blank, and warm to warm up his feet, his freezing feet, right? If you remember from the passage we read before, I think it was like 50 below was the temperatures that he's dealing with in this environment. So fire and warm for number 2. 3 then, based on the evidence in the passage, you can conclude that he is suffering from
Hypothermia.
Hypothermia, yeah, which is the condition is when you're
Row code.
Yeah, you're basically, it's the scientific word for freezing to death, right?
Yeah.
Your body temperature is dropping. I'll tell you a quick story. Since a lot of you have youngins, when Lisa and I had Emma, our child, and we brought her home from the hospital, first time parents, it's just that whole stressful situation and everything, and she's just crying. She's crying. She won't go to sleep and everything. Finally, we check her temperature, and it was like 96 degrees. And we were like, oh my God, we're freezing her to death, and I think I mentioned we kind of keep our place cold. And we were like pumping up the heat, and it's just like, it was just one of those things, just like, you hear about people who are going to be first time parents, and they're so scared about, harming their child and everything. And it's like, if you're a parent, if you're a veteran parent, you're like, look, here's everything that I did and my child is healthy and happy. So, but yeah, her poor little body was 96 degrees. We were just slowly freezing her to death. So number 4, so more fill in the blanks here. So number 3 was hypothermia, Hypothermia. And for number 4, from the evidence in paragraph 3, you can conclude that blank drops from the spruce tree and puts out the blank.
Either snow or water.
Yeah, so snow, I think, is going to be what they're looking for. Snow drops and puts out
the fire.
Puts out the fire. Yeah, so those are really, those are very obvious kind of conclusions you can draw what we were looking for, right? You could draw a conclusion. He needed to make a fire to warm up, to stay warm, particularly his feet, because he's taking his moccasins off. He needs to warm up his feet because there's frozen ice on his shoes. And then secondly, at the end, he realizes he made a mistake of where he built the fire because it's under a tree that's heavy with snow. So the conclusion you could draw there is he's just waiting for that snow to fall, put his fire out, and put him in a really bad situation of suffering from hypothermia. So snow and fire for number 4. Okay, that's it. That is the quiz. So one was A. Our fill in the blank for number 2 was fire. You need to build a fire. And the second blank was warm. For 3, of course, he's doing those things to prevent hypothermia. And for 4, he's worried about the snow. It's going to put out the fire. Okay. So they may need me to follow up on anything there. I think you kind of get the idea, right? We're talking about, a lot of it is about what comes next, or what bigger ideas can you draw from what you're reading? Just like we talked about Laird being in the wheelchair in his situation, or the gentleman that's going to freeze to death when his fire gets put out. And then it says to draw conclusions in fiction, pay attention to the details of the story, right? That's everything that we talked about. Building that fire, where he built it. Those are all details of that story. Laird's illness, being in a wheelchair, covered in blankets next to the pool, people worried about seeing him. All details of the story that you're going to be able to use to make inferences and then make conclusions. So often you combine those details in a story with your own experiences and make an important observation that will help you understand what happens in the story or what the author means. This observation is the conclusion, right? So we also draw on our own experiences. So I was talking about, we may know, we have friends or family that have suffered from an illness. We see what that does to them. We know what it's like to be cold, and what that could do to your body, and how that feels. So those are all things that are relatable that we can help draw those conclusions with by looking at our own experiences. And our next little passage here from The Little Winter, Joy Williams, 1989. And the title above here, our short title, is The Woman at the Airport. So it says, she was in the airport waiting for her flight to be called when a woman came to the phone near her chair. The woman stood there dialing, and after a while began talking in a flat, aggrieved voice. Gloria couldn't hear everything by any means, but she did hear her say, I think there's a word missing there. She did hear her say, "If anything happens to this plane, I hope you'll be satisfied." The woman spoke monotonously and without mercy. She was tall and disheveled and looked the very picture of someone who recently had ceased to be cherished. Nevertheless, she was still being mollified on the other end of the phone. Gloria heard with astounding clarity the part about the plane being repeated several times. The woman slammed down the receiver and boarded Gloria's flight, flinging herself down in a first-class seat. Gloria proceeded to the rear of the plane and sat quietly, thinking that every person is on the brink of eternity every moment, that the ways and means of leaving this world are innumerable and often inconceivable. And looking at our underlined passages here, where it says the woman stood there dialing, and after a while began talking in a flat, aggrieved voice. It says, from the description of the woman's voice as aggrieved, you can infer that she thinks someone has mistreated her, right? If you have a grievance with somebody, that's the idea there. That's the adjective, aggrieved. And then secondly, she was tall and disheveled and looked the very picture of someone who recently had ceased to be cherished. It's a very interesting choice of words. Gloria thinks that the woman looks like someone who recently had ceased to be cherished. What does that mean? Someone who feels unloved, right? Someone who has been abandoned, that's not being cared for, that's being neglected, right? If you're ceased to be cherished, that means you're not being loved. So you can start drawing conclusions about this woman. Talking in a flat, aggrieved voice. Someone has wronged her. She's tall and disheveled, right? So that's telling you something about her too. She's not in the best condition, probably emotionally. Something's happened to her, and the way she's talking on their phone. So we can maybe assume maybe she's going through a divorce, maybe she's splitting up with her partner, something like that is happening to this woman. We can draw that conclusion. Okay. Let's open up our workbook here, get to some questions. And then using logic. So in this passage, Gloria collects information just as readers do when drawing conclusions. She uses what she knows about relationships and adds it to her observations of the unhappy woman. So same thing we do. Gloria is now, this lady in the story, the subject here is doing the same thing with this lady that we are doing in analyzing these passages and drawing conclusions. Grace, could you read question 1 for us?
All right. Which is the most logical conclusion to draw from this passage? A, a woman who is on the phone at the airport annoys Gloria. B, Gloria watches a woman who has recently ended a relationship. C, Gloria makes friends with a sad woman on an airplane. And D, a woman makes a fuss about boarding Gloria's flight. Is it B?
B. Yeah, it is B. You got it. A little echo I hear there.
Yeah.
So yeah, B is a boy. Gloria watches a woman who has recently ended a relationship. So that's, Gloria is sort of making the same conclusions we are about this woman. Somebody who's likely just been through a rough patch with a partner. So one is B as a boy. Christiana, could you read question 2 for us?
Yeah. The question says, the most logical conclusion to draw about Gloria is that she is new. I can't see. Okay. Oh my God. Okay. A is a kind observer and deep thinker. B is an experienced and a relaxed traveler. C, often listens to other people's conversation. D, believes airport security should be
stricter.
Stricter. I think A.
Hey, yeah, that's keen, a observer. So she's sharp. She's observant. She focuses on people and thinks about them. So the type of skill sets that we're trying to use ourselves here. So she's observant and she thinks critically about what she's observing. So she's A. 2 is A for that. We have a new passage here, Angela's gifts. Let me see. I'm going to go ahead and read the first couple here. I'll hand off to somebody here as we go. So for Sissy Miller, Gilbert Clandon taking up the pearl brooch that lay among a litter of rings and brooches on a little table in his wife's drawing room, read the inscriptions for Sissy Miller with my love. It was like Angela to have remembered even Sissy Miller, her secretary. Yet how strange it was. Gilbert Clandon thought once more that she had left everything in such order, a little gift of some sort for every one of her friends. It was as if she had foreseen her death. Yet she had been in perfect health when she left the house that morning, 6 weeks ago, when she stepped off the curb in Piccadilly and the car had killed her. Etta, you want to read this next paragraph?
Okay. He was waiting for Sissy Miller. He had asked her to come. He owed her. He felt, after all the years she had been with them, this token of consideration. Yes, he went on. As he sat there waiting, it was strange that Angela had left everything in such order. Every friend had been left some little token of her affection. Every ring, every necklace, every little Chinese box. She had a passion for little boxes, had a name on it, and each had some memory for him. Hold on, is that one? Okay, yeah, had some memory for him. This he had given her. This the enamel dolphin with the ruby eyes she had pounced upon one day in the back street in Venice. He could remember her little cry of delight to him, of course. She had left nothing in particular, unless it were her diary. 15 little volumes bound in green leather stood behind him on her writing table. Ever since they were married, she had kept a diary. Some of their very few, he could not call them quarrels, say tiffs, had been about that diary. When he came in and found her writing, she always shut it or put her hand over it. No, 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 he could hear her say, after I'm dead, perhaps. So she had left it him. She had left it to him as her legacy. It was the only thing they had not shared when she was alive, but he had always taken it for granted that she would outlive him. If only she had stopped one moment and had thought what she was doing, she would be alive now. But she had stepped straight off the curb. The driver of the car had said at the inquest. She had given him no chance to pull up.
Okay, yeah, that was from The Legacy by Virginia Woolf, 1944. Obviously, we're somewhere in, well, it's in London, because we're talking about Piccadilly, and that is a very bizarre English spelling for curb, K-E-R-B. You know, in the U.S., we see C-U-R-B. So that's just one of those things, you know, just thinking about a different, you know, the English, you know, they like to spell things different than we do from time to time. Tracy, could you read question 3 for us?
Yes. On the basis of the detail in the passage, which is the most logical conclusion to draw about Angela? A. She treated Cissy Miller badly. B. She owned valuable jewelry. C. She was rich and famous. D. She was thoughtful and organized. D.
D. Yeah, she was thoughtful and organized. You know, every ring, every necklace, every little Chinese box, she had a passion for little boxes, had a name on it. That's kind of an indication there, one of them, that she's very organized. Okay, and then number 4, let's see. Sasha Gay, could you read question 4?
Yes. Though she died suddenly, Angela left a little gift of some sort for every one of her friends. You can conclude from the facts surrounding her death that Angela A. told her secrets to Sissy Miller. B. forgot to leave her husband a gift. D. did not tell anyone of her illness. And well, C. did not tell anyone of her illness. And D. planned her own death. I'm thinking B or D.
D. And that's something, you know, they tell you to watch for signs of suicide in people, is that watch for them to start giving their things away. and generally just sort of lack any, see any value in their possessions anymore. So, you know, if she's leaving gifts and she's has these little gifts sorted for everybody with their names on them and everything, that sounds like something's going to happen to her. Right. So, you know, of course, I mean, we plan for the worst, but if you're starting to, it's like, well, I want somebody, you know, this person to have this and this person to have that, you're either writing a will or you're planning to harm yourself. You know, that's kind of one of those indications. So yeah, D, and that's, again, you know, looking at the inferences and drawing conclusions about that. You know, something that you would be concerned with if somebody like a family member is like, I want you to have this, and then you see him giving something else away and something else away, you might want to stop and ask him, like, are you okay? Yeah. Right. So you draw conclusions that way. So 4 is D as in dog. And again, that's drawing on our own experiences, right? And prior knowledge and our other knowledge of events, people that can help us lead to that conclusion. Grace, how about number 5 for us?
Grace, did you say Grace?
Yes. Number 5.
Oh, okay. The narrator says, to him, of course, she had left nothing in particular, unless it was her diary. From this statement and other details in the passage, the most logical conclusion to draw about Angela's diary is that it A, reveals problems in her marriage, B, includes love poems to her husband, C, will likely be published as a book, and D, is the gift that her husband wanted most. Is it A or B?
It's A, yeah. She leaves stuff for everybody else, but maybe her diary for him. So yeah, there might be, you know, trouble in paradise, right? She might be thinking a little more about others than him, and that could be an issue there. And we might see a little more about that in number 6 here, I believe. Christiana, could you read number 6 for us?
Okay. Number 6. Angela's diary calls Gilbert. Gilbert was see. I'm pretty sure the name Gilbert
Clarendon.
Okay,
yeah, Gilbert Clarendon.
Yeah. And Angela to have, he would not call them quarrels, says paragraph 3, which is the most logical conclusion to draw from this situation. A, Angela shared everything with Gilbert. B, married couples are born to have quarrels. C, Gilbert has tried to minimize material problems. D, diaries like Joe cause material problems. Is it why? Oh. B or A?
It's C. See, Gilbert has tried to minimize marital problems. So in his thoughts, he won't call them quarrels. He'll call them tiffs. So he's softening the idea of their fights by using something that's a little, again, thinking of word choice and things like that. Oh, we don't have quarrels, but we have little tiffs. We have little arguments. So that's him. You could draw conclusions that he is trying to minimize any marital problems. Maybe he might be part of the problem by not seeing larger issues, and he's undermining maybe his own marriage by not, thinking that they have more serious problems than they do. So yeah, he's trying to minimize marital problems there. So 6 is C, and we have a new passage here. Etta, go ahead and read the first paragraph for us.
Okay. Poor Roy's children. Whenever we children came to stay at my grandmother's house, we were put to sleep in the sewing room. A bleak, shabby utilitarian
Utilitarian.
Utilitarian rectangle, more offices than bedroom, more attic than office, that played to the hierarchy of chambers the role of a poor relation. It was a room seldom entered by the other members of the family, seldom swept by the maid, a room without pride, the old sewing machine, some cast off chairs. There was nothing here to encourage us to consider this our home.
Tracy, you want to read the second paragraph?
Yes. Poor Roy's children, as commiseration damply styled, the four of us could not afford illusions in the family opinion. Our family had put us beyond the pale by dying suddenly of influenza and taking our young mother with him. A defection that was remarked on with horror paradise of the hereafter. Our reputation was clouded by this misfortune. There was a prevailing sense, not only in the family, but in storekeepers, servants, streetcar conductor, and all the stylists of our circle, that my grandfather, a rich man, had behaved with extraordinary munificence, generosity in allotting a sum of money for our support and installing us with some disagreeable middle-aged relation in a dingy house 2 blocks distant from his own. From Chandler Prison, who he is, by Mary McCarthy, 1949.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
What is the most logical conclusion to draw about the children stay at their grandmother's house? A, they receive attention from the maid. B, they are spoiled by a generous grandmother. C, they enjoy playing games in the attic. D, they are treated as unwelcome guests. D.
D, they are treated as unwelcome guests. We get that sense from the whole passage, right? That it's just, you could look at that last line. In allotting a sum of money for our support, there was a prevailing sense not only in the family, but in storekeepers, servants, streetcar conductors, and other satellites of our circle. So people that knew these kids, that my grandfather, a rich man, had behaved with extraordinary munificence. I believe that's how it's pronounced, extraordinary generosity, in allotting a sum of money for our support. And installing us with some disagreeable middle-aged relations in a dingy house 2 blocks distant from his own. So he doesn't even live with them, right? He lives, doesn't live with them. Then we hear when they, visit their grandmother's house that they're, put to sleep in a sewing room that's, basically between an attic and an office, just not great conditions. So that we can, draw a conclusion that they're not welcome. That the death of their parents was something that caused some issue and strain there, and not a situation that their grandparents want to take care of them. And then number 8, Sasha Gay, you want to read number 8 for us?
Okay. The narrator says that in the family's opinion, the children could not afford illusions, which is the most logical conclusion to draw from the scene and other details in the passage. A, the family doesn't want these privileged children to become spoiled. B, the family does not think that the children will live up to its standards. C, the family feels sorry for the children. And D, the family is worried that the children will not have enough money. Is it B?
I think you're breaking up there a little bit. Is it B?
B?
Yeah, so B is in boy. The family doesn't think the children will live up to its standards. So let me see here. Poor Roy's children, as commiseration damply styled the four of us, could not afford illusions in the family opinion. So, there's just not a lot of hope there for them. And then number 9, let's go to Grace here. You could take question 9 for us.
All right. On the basis of the details in the passage, which is the most reasonable conclusion to draw about the relationship between the children's grandfather and the children's father and grandfather? A, the grandfather loved his son but did not approve of his son's wife. B, the children's father and grandfather fought constantly. C, the grandfather was the stepfather of the children's father. And D, the father disapproved of the grandfather saving so much money. Is it B?
So it's A. The grandfather loved his son, but not approve of his son's wife. So, right here, defection that was remarked on the horror and grief commingled, as though our mother had been a pretty secretary with whom he had wantonly absconded into the irresponsible paradise of the hereafter. Our reputation was clouded by his misfortune. And you could also assume that maybe this is partially why the grandfather is not particularly fond of the grandchildren, because he did not approve of his son's wife. You can also make that inference as well. So 9 is A. And then 10, Christiana, could you take question 10?
Please, did you call me?
Yeah. Could you read question 10 for us?
Okay, number 10. The narrator says that the children's rich grandfather paid for installing us with some disagreeable middle-aged relationship because that word is it that
dingy house, dirty.
Okay, yeah. Dingy. Okay, in a dingy house, 2 blocks distance from his own. You can conclude from the tone of this statement and from other details in the passage that the narrator is fond of his or her grandfather. B, grandfather is grieving over the loss of his son. C, grandfather is not generous. D, narrator appreciates what the grandfather has done. Is it B or A?
It's C. So the idea here, installing some disagreeable middle-aged relations in a dingy house 2 blocks distant from his own. The narrator here is saying, the people around us probably thought our grandfather, being a rich man, was being very generous taking in his grandchildren. However, he installed us with some disagreeable middle-aged relation. So it seems like they're living with another relative, and in a dirty house that's not even really that close to his own. It's like 2 blocks away. So he's, they're kind of out of sight, out of mind. So number C. C for number 10. And I'm going to go ahead and read our last one here. And we're back to Laird. So from before, this is the character that we know that's ill, that's fallen ill, and he's talking with his mother here. Dad ran off quickly, he said one night. She had been wondering when he would mention it. He had a phone call to make, she said automatically. Laird looked directly in her eyes, his expression one of gentle reproach. He was letting her know he had caught her in the central lie of her life, which was that she understood Martin's obsession with his work. She averted her gaze. The truth was that she had never understood. Why couldn't he sit with her for half an hour after dinner? Or, if not with her, why not with his dying son? I don't think Dad can stand to be around me. That's not true. It was true. Poor Dad. He always been a hypochondriac. We have that in common. He must hate this. He just wants you to get well. If that's what he wants, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint him again. At least this will be the last time I let him down. He said this merrily with the old familiar light darting from his eyes. She allowed herself to be amused. He had always been fond of teasing and held no subject sacred. As the de facto authority figure in the house, Martin had been home enough to be the real disciplinarian. She had often been forced to reprimand Laird, but in truth, she shared his sense of humor. She responded to it now by leaning over to cuff him on the arm. It was an automatic response prompted by a burst of high spirits that took no notice of the circumstances. It was a mistake. Even through the thickness of his terry cloth robe, her knuckles knocked on the bone. There was nothing left of him. It's his loss, she said, the shock of Laird's thinness making her serious again. So, yeah, now we definitely see that Laird is ill and he's basically wasting away. And, she touches him, she basically can feel his bones under his robe. And they're talking about his sort of the absence of his father during this illness and his failing health. So for number 11, Etta, you want to read question 11 for us?
Which is the most logical conclusion to draw from Lard's conversation with his mother? A, Lard is angry with his mother. B, Lard uses humor to avoid talking about uncomfortable subjects. C, Lard is cautious about expressing his true feelings. Or D, Lard attempts to open and honest with her. D?
D. Yeah, he's being open and honest, right? They're discussing maybe things that haven't been said about his father. So now he's talking very openly about that situation with his dad, Martin. All right, so 11 is D as a dog. 12, Tracy, you want to read question 12 here?
Yes. Laird refers to his father, saying that at least this will be the last time I let him down. Paragraph 8. The most logical conclusion to draw from this statement and all the detail in the passage is that A. Martin is proud of large accomplishments. B. Lad and Martin do not get along well. C. Martin had always encouraged Lad. D. Lad and his mother dislike Martin. B.
Yeah, B as in boy, right?
Yes.
We could definitely see that they don't get along very well. This whole passage kind of leads into that there's been some strain in their relationship, even maybe when Laird wasn't ill. So number 12 is B. For 13, let's go to Sasha Gay to read 13 for us.
It says, in the last paragraph, Lard's mother says that Martin's behavior is his loss, which is the most logical conclusion to draw about the statement according to the details in the passage. A, she believes Martin is right to ignore Lard. B, she thinks Martin is missing out by ignoring Lard. C, she loves Martin more than she loves Lard. Or D, she wants Lard to be more respectful towards Martin. Is it B?
B. Yeah, thinks he's missing out, right? That's very obvious there. It's his loss that you're not that he's not here. And then 14, final question. Grace, would you like to take number 14 for us?
Okay. Number 14. On the basis of information in the passage, which is the most logical conclusion to draw about Martin? Martin has always worked hard to support his wife and sickly son. B, Martin's strict discipline has caused lads to turn against him. C, Martin has been distant and preoccupied before and during last illness. And D, Martin and his wife have shared equally in bringing up their son. C?
C. Yeah, we definitely can make that conclusion, right? That's not even a conclusion. I mean, they basically flat out say it here. You know, Dad ran off quickly. He had a phone call to make, and then getting into the whole idea, you know, Dad can't stand to be around me. You know, he's always been a hypochondriac. So, it's a very easy conclusion to make that Martin is distant and preoccupied before and during his illness, that this relationship's been strained for a while. Okay. Does anybody need to follow up on any of the questions here? Did everybody get all the answers?
I need 13.
13 was B as in boy.
Okay.
Any others? All good? Okay. So go ahead and stop sharing or stop recording.